We call this meeting to order of November 5, Land Use Committee at 9:30 a.m. And with full attendance. So we're going to switch the agenda around. Item number 4, the Sedgwick multifamily tax abatement request, will be moved to item number 1. All right, Mr. Bond.
Yeah, so we have received a specific request to amend our adopted map in the residential tax abatement code. And the existing map is in chapter 3.48030. There are very specific criteria that council considers when establishing these maps, and they are enshrined in state law. I don't believe that there's anything that precludes you from considering additional criteria. But the proposal that's been brought forward, this property is adjacent to Fred Meyer. It's kind of on the edge of the city boundary. I think there's 2 or 3 properties between this property and the city limits, but there's not a whole lot else that the city controls to the east of this site. This property is designated in our comprehensive plan as a local center. And I should point out that PSRC adopted new centers standards that we're going to have to incorporate into our code moving forward, and it calls for within local centers that we have a certain number of jobs and housing units per acre in order to planned and realized and eventually realized in order to be counted as a center moving forward. And so certainly seeing multifamily housing in this area would help us with the housing portion of this, since that center is mostly commercial at this time.
I'm sorry, it's currently zoned commercial?
Well, the whole center is commercial if you look at the intersection of Bethel.
So that parcel's zoned commercial?
Currently, yes.
Okay.
And so it allows for mixed-use development via a conditional use permit at this time. There's some discussion under the updated zoning code of designating this as a commercial mixed use, which would allow residential or commercial development on the site. But in any event, the proposal that we have seen most recently is for a conditional use permit that would include some small commercial up near Sedgwick with 100 or so multifamily housing units there. So with regard to the criteria that we have in terms of designating this, I don't think it is a stretch if you chose to expand this, but ultimately this is a council discretion issue. It's not that you're entitled to be granted inclusion in the multifamily tax abatement area. Council can say yes or no based on the reasons and the benefits of the project. With that said, I did a little bit of research, and I had lunch on Friday with my counterpart in the city of Bremerton, who was talking about Bremerton's tax abatement ordinance. And I've done a little bit of research since then, looking at how different cities have rolled this out. And the interesting thing is that Bremerton has actually designated all of its local centers as tax abatement areas. And we generally, we borrowed the language for our code from Bremerton, and so ours is very similar, except that they basically said if this is a local center, we want to encourage multifamily housing to be there in support of our transit-oriented strategies. Port Orchard, when we designated our maps, we really looked at using this in areas where redevelopment was sought, because there's higher costs of redeveloping property compared to developing new sites. And so we really didn't look at the Sydney-Sedgwick area, the Sedgwick-Bethel area, or the Bethel corridor near Lund for inclusion, but we did focus on Mile Hill and downtown. And so I think it would maybe be appropriate to revisit, what are the reasons that we have multifamily tax abatement, and what are the city's objectives here. One of the things that we've realized going through our first project, which was the Overlook Apartments up behind the movie theater, is that it's really not, right now, affordable housing is defined as being affordable to people earning 80 to 120% of median income for the Bremerton-Silverdale area. That's actually about an average rent in Port Orchard. So we're giving 12-year abatements to people who are providing basically market rate apartments, or maybe slightly below market rate And so I did a little bit more looking, and when I went to Seattle's tax abatement code to look at how they do this, and similarly to Bremerton, they've designated all of their local centers as tax abatement areas. But what they've done is they've actually said that a certain percentage of units have to be affordable to people earning 80% or below on an area median income, as opposed to the 80 to 120%. And so it seems to me that Seattle is really focused on providing affordable housing, whereas Bremerton is focused on developing its local centers with multifamily market rate housing. And so I think a good question for this committee and the council to ask themselves more broadly, without focusing so much on this one property, is what are we trying to accomplish with this program, and are we set up to best do that? So I think I'll let you guys discuss the proposal from there. But I think you should have that high-level discussion first, and then kind of figure out whether this fits in with committee objectives and ultimately council objectives.
So my first question, is there a time frame by which the applicant, if you will, is interested in having a decision made?
So they have and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you've submitted a conditional use permit as of last week?
As of this week, it'll come in.
Okay, so they're submitting their CUP application this week. You know, realistically, January is probably a timeline for when a decision will be issued on that. They have said that they would like to be under construction by March, if possible, and so they're I think moving forward with architectural design as well as the conditional use permit submittal.
Well, this decision really plays into the feasibility of the project in general. So with the 1.3 million in impact fees, this is somewhat of it's really close to penciling out. So the tax abatement really helps this project succeed. So we wouldn't want to get too far into a fully developed architectural set before we knew, which decision was going to be made on this.
Okay.
So is that the amount that would be waived? Or how does it pencil up for the city's viewpoint? Or?
So remember that the property tax abatement is either an 8 or a 12 years, and it's going to basically lock in their assessed value at, I think this is a vacant property now, right? So they continue paying the same taxes that they're paying
As
now.
it is now, yeah.
And so for the 8 years, it's whatever the value of their new project is, and I think they've provided some dollar amounts associated with that. And so they would be paying, what's our current per thousand assessment rate? Is it $360 or?
That's the total pie, but we only get.
Yeah, we only get a small piece of that. I think we're about $1.
We share it with, I think, $1.70-ish. We share our slice of the pie with fire district and the library district, because we annexed into the library district and the fire district. So when they pass levies, then our piece slides or moves. I guess.
So it doesn't. I'm sorry. So it doesn't affect the impact fees. It does not.
No, they're
Not
still going to
so-
pay impact
okay.
fees, and they're
Right.
going to pay building
It's
permit
the
fees.
future property tax rate that would be locked in at the current. Okay.
For a period of time.
I don't have a vote on this, but it would be administratively, I think we would be better to look at this whole. I mean, I want to see this
Holistically,
project
or-
move forward, but whether it's our centers or we did the abatement that we did for primarily for affordable housing reasons and for economic development reasons in the areas of the city where we wanted to see redevelopment. And we were purposeful in not leaving the green development areas out. If we want to consider those green development areas, I think there needs to be a methodology to that, whether it's finding ways to fund the Sedgwick and Bethel corridor plans, because there's a nexus to that, or it's part of this centers discussion that Nick's making, and looking at our centers and making our centers perform better. I think there's rationale for doing this. I'd just like to see it done in a systematic approach versus piecemeal.
So our purpose statements for why we have adopted this are in our code, and it's pretty short. in terms of the reasons. When you go to Seattle's code, they list about seven different things that they're trying to accomplish. Bremerton has its own reasons, and so we were really just trying to get something on the books to make this available back when the economy was still just kind of ramping up. And now that we've had it on the books for a few years and we've seen how it works, I think there may be some room for revision of our existing policy and looking at the map as well as a whole. But I'd like to hear from each of you kind of how you see this working.
My recollection of one of the reasons we did it in the first place was, and this is the wrong terminology, but it's like we wanted to encourage in areas that we thought were underdeveloped, like the Mile Hill, and just encourage more development there. Sedgwick is much more appealing because it's close to transportation, so it doesn't fit that criteria. But I appreciate what Bremerton and Seattle are doing, or that they've made their entire, they put it in all their areas.
Remind us quickly of the difference between the 8 and the 12 years, based on the number of.
So to
suburban
get
units.
the 8-year, you just have to build multifamily housing and you're eligible. It doesn't have to be affordable.
Okay.
To get the 12-year, it has to be affordable to people earning 80 to 120% of median income. But really, once we actually looked at the numbers, the difference between 8 and 12 years isn't significant other than some reporting.
Right.
Generally, the rents are about the same. So, the other thing I noticed in Seattle's policy was they actually targeted certain areas of the city for providing additional affordable housing. So in some of their centers, they say that it has to be affordable to people earning 60% of median. In other areas, it's 80%. But when and I think they're trying to spread kind of, especially low-income units around to areas that don't have affordable housing. They're trying to encourage more of that. And in other areas, they're not focusing on just dumping a ton of really low-income units into areas that are already lower income. So there is the ability to sort of engineer this, and if you're looking at like the center at Albertson, Sydney, Sedgwick, does that area have the ability to take maybe more low-income units, or what's the transit access? Do we want to encourage these things downtown? So you can really fine-tune it by specifically creating criteria for each of your centers to try to accomplish objectives.
So what's the downside? What's the unintended consequence?
Ruffles the feathers with the other junior testing districts is probably the biggest one. I mean,
Yeah.
we get fee income, we get the sales tax revenue, the fire district, the school district, they don't get anything for that.
One impact school district levies.
You're right. You're right. The levy wouldn't.
Fixed levies would impact. It'd just be like the fire district.
But fire district, library district.
Yeah,
Yeah, but that's just for a fixed period.
For a fixed period, right. So when we did our initial abatement, the fire district in particular pushed back. They felt they wanted a little more communication about what we were doing and how we were doing it. And I said, going forward, we would definitely, give them a seat at the table.
What does that mean? Give them a when?
Just we're
Hear
not
their
making
concerns.
Decisions without
Their input.
without their, consulting with them. Whether it's there wasn't enough communication.
Okay. So you want to talk a little bit more again about PSRC and what the implications of those policies might be?
Yeah, and I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I believe the final centers guidance for cities to adopt their local centers, which presumably are going to score slightly better in a competitive grant environment, is that we need to achieve, I think it's 12 activity units per acre, which is jobs and housing combined, but that I think that neither one of those can be, each of those has to be at least 20% of the total number of activity units, so that you don't have an entirely jobs center or an entirely residential center. They want sort of the synergistic effects of co-locating commercial and residential.
How many acres is this center approximately?
It goes all the way down to Bravo Terrace, so it's basically from 16 to the city limits, and then Salmonberry to the north, and the city limits to the south. So it's a pretty big area. The only other thing I was going to throw out with regard to a proposal like this is that in terms of our budget, and we obviously we'd be seeing building permit revenue coming in immediately, traffic impact fee revenue coming in immediately, which is then available. And as we're moving forward with our budget, I know that the Tremont project is over budget, and we're able to spend a certain amount of impact fee money on that, which we haven't collected the full amount that we're able to spend. So this potentially helps with things like fully funding the impact fee share of the Tremont project. Also, look, if we wanted to move forward with the Bethel Sedgwick design, which we currently can't afford, if a project of this size with that type of impact fee comes in, it suddenly allows us potentially to spend impact fee dollars on design of one of those roadways, whereas currently we didn't have the ability to include that in the draft budget, which I'm not sure if the draft budget is actually published yet or not.
So the proposed traffic improvements on this project, I mean, I know you don't have a complete application packet at this point, but what frontage improvements, traffic improvements would be required as a result of the project?
So their traffic report, which I have not reviewed in detail, but it does not have recommendations for anything other than the access to and from the property with the driveway. We need to meet with WashDOT and talk to WashDOT and see if they're on board with this. But they were basically showing that there are not off-site improvements that are needed specifically related to this, although their report did not go past the Bethel-Sedgwick intersection. So whether Bravo Terrace or anything else is, I think most of our problems are already failures, and so this wouldn't be causing the failure. It would just be making that failure worse. Mm-hmm. And all of the projects that this is going to be impacting are part of our impact fee calculation, and so their impact fee money is going to all of those projects anyway.
And the traffic report shows that a left turn movement isn't problematic?
Well, I think that the people who are going to be most impacted by left turning movement are the people trying to leave this project. And
300 residents?
If Fred Meyer is backed up with people trying to make a left into Fred Meyer, these people might only be able to make a right, but that's not really affecting the operation of our system. It's affecting the operation of their project. Mm-hmm. And it's, I would expect that most of the traffic here is going to be a right in coming back from SR16 or from Bethel. Mm-hmm. So people may in the morning leave and go out to
Phillips.
Yeah, what's the one before Phillips that comes around to Bethel? Converse. Yeah, go south on Converse and around to Bethel.
Well, if they're going to Tacoma, they're going to go down to Phillips and Molinax, but it's still, to me, one of the issues also is that business to the east of them, that you're going to have driveway separation issues, and we did talk at the pre-app, I thought about.
You're talking about the espresso?
Yes.
Yeah, we talked about having some sort of shared entry.
Yeah.
With a right turn pocket, and I mean that'd be my preference, is to combine those and have,
The neighbor wasn't willing to cooperate.
No.
Was not.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We tried to approach everything we could.
Yeah.
to make
The
that-
issue there is going to be.
Do you know why they were not willing to cooperate?
Probably just like that pizza place didn't want to
Mark
participate with
sold.
Lowe's.
Is it Marv?
It's a new property owner.
Okay. So Marv sold it?
We found out. Yeah. Out in they live in Paulsville.
Yeah, the only issue is, WashDOT standards has, commercial driveway separation, so.
Yeah, and there may end up being conditions from WashDOT or an agreement, such as with West Coast Fitness, where they're getting a left turn today, but we may not be guaranteeing them a long-term left turning movement if that were to become a median in the future with a roundabout at Converse or somewhere further to the east, depending on what the county ends up doing.
Right.
But it's hard to get into the specific impacts of the project at such an early stage where we really haven't reviewed things. And
I guess I would just say if we saw an impact or if we saw a benefit that we can't get that adjacent landowner to see, maybe it's worthwhile then for us to get a hold of that person and say, what if? Mm-hmm. Because if you hold off on your development, you may not get what you want at all some years down the road. Mm-hmm. Maybe bring some people together.
Well, what if they were made to use that exit at Fred Meyer?
Fred Meyer would have to grant an easement. I doubt the owner there would allow that. And I don't think Fred Meyer wants traffic from the apartments coming through
Yeah,
there.
yeah, but it would they probably wouldn't. But it would make more sense holistically if there were fewer driveways
Yeah.
turning left from onto Sedgwick.
I don't think we're going to solve this
No.
today.
Right.
It's just whether
I would love to.
Yeah, I think. It sounds like there's an openness to looking at this, and so maybe we need to work as staff on some recommendations for sort of what options are there for potentially looking at all of our centers, and then also looking at the affordable housing component of this, and figure out, do we need to be a little bit more assertive in our position for affordable housing?
is it coming back to this committee then? I don't.
Well, I guess we would want to make sure the whole council's on board, right?
Okay.
When you take it to a work study and you prepare like pros and cons, because to me that's what it really boils down to, is weighing out the pros and cons. Because it seems like there's a lot more pros than cons on doing this systematically, like the mayor said.
Or come back to this committee with maybe a little more fleshed out set of
Proposal.
arguments,
Yeah.
proposal.
I think
With
you're going
respect
to
to
have
the
time. If you guys are going to have a December committee meeting, you'll have time to have that because there isn't a December work study meeting.
Okay.
So the soonest the full council is going to see this is January. So you guys,
Right.
if you guys want another, Nick making some recommendations, it isn't going to slow it down because there isn't a work study in December.
Yeah.
Sure.
But if this goes to a work study in January, that means we wouldn't have action until February.
Maybe this needs to be a report to council on Tuesday, just to say that this discussion is happening, and
Yeah.
see if there's support for continuing it.
I'm just looking at the applicants looking at
Couldn't we
starting
take
to
action
build.
on our
Your
last meeting
performance.
in January
Your performance
after
is.
the work study?
You could.
Yeah.
They don't want to kick loose on A&E. This is going to push.
Well, they're going to have an application in this week
For a CUP, yeah.
for a CUP.
But they're not going to move ahead with the A&E work until this is resolved. So
Right.
it's going to affect their construction start.
I'm just wondering about the appropriateness of discussing the CUP or the project since it's been formally submitted ahead of any sort of formal.
Well, council, this is a hearing examiner decision judicial appeal, so you wouldn't be hearing an appeal on a CUP. So I don't think there's any harm in
Okay.
discussing it.
So I think as your committee chair, you're going to make a report of your committee at the council meeting. So that's a logical
Okay.
next step to report and kind of test the water there with the city council, and that land use is looking at this. And Nick's going to bring back more information, and that they'll likely see this unless you hear, stop the train at the city council meeting, which I don't think you will.
I don't think we
Well,
will.
and I think the discussion, we just got into the weeds a little bit about driveways and traffic impacts, and I think that's really not that relevant to this first conversation. It's, do we want to include abatement in some of these other local centers or change the purpose of it? I think that
Yeah, we
needs to
have
drive
really
it,
two discussions.
right? And
Yes.
then
Yes.
we deal with.
Yeah, then staff's dealing with those issues.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
council
Yeah,
should stay
the
focused
bigger
on whether we
question
want to
is-
expand the.
Right. And I think the applicant needs to hear they feel like this is going to be favorable, because at that point you'll have to take the risk of saying, okay, this is ultimately going to get passed and the perform will work at the end of the day, so I've got to get going on my A&E.
Yeah.
With what Nick was reporting about, maybe get some more detail on that PSRC issue because it almost sounds like makes sense.
Yeah. I think that looking at the centers, our local centers for this, would be totally consistent with our PSRC objectives.
Right.
I think there's valid reasons we want to do this,
Yes.
but we want to do it, I think, holistically.
Right.
Yeah,
And looking
absolutely.
at the corridors and the centers.
Right.
The only comment that I would add is that I am a fan of seeing commercial on the first floor and residential above. We haven't seen a lot of that. Like Sydney Sedgwick, they just made it all residential.
We haven't seen a lot of, from a baking standpoint, that's kind of a problematic. The commercial space has always been the issue.
And you have so much commercial right here, right? All your services are across the street.
And I like living spaces next to commercial. I wish
Right.
actually Fred Meyer had apartments above it.
This is proposed mixed use.
Yeah.
But it's commercial buildings on the front with apartments behind it rather than a mixed-use building.
Right.
And so if that's,
Well, but ultimately, when the zoning ordinance changes and gives us the ability to have full residential, that, to be transparent, that's our aim, is to put 113 units on there, opposed to the 107 with the 2,900 square feet of commercial. Just from a feasibility of the project type of thing, those extra units help a lot. So,
and the greedy pirate side of the city is,
but
we get, you know, in the abatement, the commercial, we get the property tax. It's not abated. If we get the commercial component. If we, you know.
Right.
So
that
we
is-
still like a commercial component.
It's,
Either.
you know, I know they would like
All
you know,
residential.
all residential, because that's,
Yeah.
you know, it's more straightforward.
But ultimately, after the 8-year, if it's full residential, isn't that more favorable as far as taxes are concerned? To get the extra.
Sales taxes, we love sales tax.
Gotcha.
Almost 2 to 1.
Yeah, but I think in terms of property tax, a 3-story apartment versus a 1-story commercial building is probably going to have a more favorable property
Yeah.
tax benefit.
Yeah, that's true.
And there's utility
sales
taxes and
Well,
There's no sales tax on that part.
no, but they're spending.
Yeah,
They could have a good
Spending.
job.
yeah.
well, there is online purchases, but that's a small percentage of.
yeah.
No, I'm just, I'm
Well,
walking
this is
across.
West Sound Utility District too, so.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
All right, yeah.
All right, we're down the weeds
So,
again.
yeah.
I like it.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll
Thank
work
you.
on something between now and.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah. If we work backwards, I think the chief would want to weigh into on the bridge. That's really
Number
a quick
3?
one.
Okay. So this was put on because there's a change.org petition going around online where, as of a couple weeks ago, there were 60 persons who had supported some sort of, I'll call it a catchment device, if you will, for people who are jumping from the bridge. And so it was my thought, maybe others thought, that this wasn't going to go away anytime soon. And maybe it was worth talking about.
Mark did get a quote, which is staggering.
I knew it would be.
Yeah. So
Based on the bridge of that size, and our bridge manager had a similar analysis on a bridge, and it's upwards of $1 million. So
There's been 2 jumpers in the last 11 years,
Oh.
I think.
and I think the chief's response last time, immediately after the jump, was pretty apropos, which is, and I don't want to sound coarse, but there's a lot of ways
Yeah.
to end your
Go
life
on.
if you choose to, and we're going to put $1 million into a bridge and to keep them from jumping off that, but they could just walk off the sidewalk and jump into the front of a car. I mean, there's so many ways if somebody wants to end their life. So,
anyway, we did research it, and it's pushing $1 million, which would be general fund dollars that we
Right.
simply don't have.
Okay.
I think Manette Bridge is actually more popular than one over in Bremerton. I think they probably have a jumper a year at least.
The Narrows too.
Well, the Narrows, yeah. I mean, that's just, yeah.
The difference is that we've got, you know,
I mean, that's close. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah.
those folks jump in the water and then they're retrieved whole, and our bridge is messy because we're not jumping into the water.
Well, I'm glad that it was put on the agenda because I think people need to know it's $1 million solution if we would even want to spend
not
money
even-
that way.
if
And
you
I don't know
call
that
it
it's-
a solution.
Yeah, I don't know that it's effective.
it's a deterrent. But
Well-
It's a deterrent to jumping off the bridge.
That bridge. Yeah.
But what is the thought behind putting a sign or a phone?
Well, there are signs up there now. People have posted things.
I know, but,
call
a more permanent
crisis
sign.
line,
Yeah.
that type of thing.
Do you think that's beneficial, or do you think that gives people ideas?
I have no idea, Fred. I really don't. I mean, you could post something on the bridge if you wanted to. You know,
There were handmade
make a
signs that we
permanent
saw.
sign about crisis line or something.
I just think that this is a mental health issue and it's not a public works issue. I mean, again, it's like disparity is something that we can't fix with a sign. If somebody's walking there with intent, a sign that says, you know, if you've made that step to drive there and get ready to or walk, I don't see where a sign.
Yeah, I think the only reason, well, one of them was just proximity. The guy lived not too far from the bridge. It's not like our bridge is thought of like the Narrows or even Manette. I mean, those are thought of, and
Right.
I think this was just an opportunity. Just like if you were mid-bridge and there was a fence or a net or something, you'd probably just jump out in front of the next coming truck. I mean, that's just, we've had 2 in the last 11 years.
Yeah, I know it's.
And it might be longer than that, but I wasn't here before that.
No, when I first came here, there was that gal, and then there was this one.
And that's it.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, it just. Yeah, it's like, where we get complaints saying that we need to pick up needles, but when we met with the health district, they're like, no, this is our problem, we need to deal with it. It's not a city issue. There's an epidemic out there that we need to address, and we're still waiting to hear back. But
Yeah, we don't have the $1 million to, it's not solving the problem.
Yeah.
it's not solving the
Right,
problem.
but that's,
All right.
It's like the
unfortunately,
homeless
it's not
issue.
solving the problem.
The only problem it solves is somebody jumping off the bridge. It doesn't solve the suicide
It's a
problem.
deterrent. It's not a solution.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks, Mark, for checking out.
So you want
Anything
Scott's
else on
here.
that?
We've got Scott here too for the park. There's a couple of parking issues. Mark's got one for Holland Sons, and then the other one's related to Ed Turner Park and how that one came forward. Is the chief mentioned that they've been doing a policing activity there and felt there was a potential solution in limiting some parking options there. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chief and Mark, whichever one you want to tackle first. It's up to you.
Well, so there's 3 parking issues, I think. So the one is, the Holland Sons actually came as a public work complaint, and it's a legitimate complaint. It's mainly county staff that come down to CALB when they leave in the evenings. Where you,
A pretty good picture in your
yeah,
pack.
when you come down. If you're looking back to the east, there's a sight distance issue because Holland Sons has a lot of vehicles parked in their area, but they also park along the road frontage. And so
Okay. It confused me because they said Velist Motors, but
it's up to
It's next to the list.
It's up
Okay.
to the list. So we would
Okay.
the sight distance basically would eliminate from the telephone pole west. So to the west edge of the Velist building, there would still be room for 2 or 3 cars in front of the Velist building up until where you have the crosswalk. But it's going to eliminate like those 3 parking stalls right there from DeKalb looking back. And I think this is kind of a no-brainer. This just has to be done because this is one of those situations that we've been now put on notice,
Right.
and it doesn't meet the sight distance criteria. And if somebody gets T-boned, then
Right.
so that one is pretty straightforward. I think we need to change municipal code and limit. Holland Sons aren't going to be happy, but they're parking all around there anyway. They're parking over in that city lot next to Recognition Plus. They have a huge parking need.
yeah, they do. They also have some vehicles that have not moved in quite some time.
Right, and I think that's something they have to look at.
RV.
I had the same thing. They had vehicles that are perpetually being repaired. So I think they have to. They got plenty of room to overturn. They're just choosing not to. So the second issue.
So just to not belabor this, but one of the solutions was to sign it so there was no left turn. And that's not on the table, right? Because I think you'd have stacking issues down the hill then.
Yes, we already have
Yeah,
issues.
okay.
So you've got a lot of county employees that
Yeah, I use that.
about 50-50 where some go
They're
down.
coming down Klein to make a left or
Yeah,
down?
they're trying to go west. So you have 3 options. You either turn down to Calb and then try to get into the traffic at 4 o'clock, 3:30, 4:30, or you go down and you try to turn onto Kitsap Street, the little piece of Kitsap. But the problem there is that only holds 2 cars. So now you got people stacking up Klein to the south. Some people actually, because I look at it all day long, some people actually then will go around and then they'll take a left, which is really if we should eliminate any left turn, it should be the left turn where Klein comes onto Bay Street
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
the tip of that triangle, because
Yeah.
that's nuts.
Yeah.
It's bad.
We should. That's probably part of this solution too. That's not a safe maneuver.
That's a really poor.
Well, and then you got people all day, probably 10 times a day, somebody's coming on Bay Street heading west, but then they turn south onto Klein. They think they have the right of way. It's like every day there's 5 or 6 screeching, honking. And I don't know why people think they have the right of way, but they drive up like from 7-Eleven and they just head straight up Klein thinking they have the right of way, and it's a near head on, every
Crossing
day.
traffic.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I'd love to see a roundabout there, but that's not
Okay.
on our list. So that's the one issue. I think we can look at that signage, work with the DOT on that.
So they would lose like 5 spots, or
I think there's only 3 in there.
okay, yeah.
But
No,
it's-
I was surprised that parking was allowed there, but
It's 4 hour, I think.
So you're going to be talking with them. Will there be more of a discussion about some of the other issues, the battery truck that comes in and parks in the road?
was that a zoning issue?
Yeah.
No, I think the issue there is simply, we'll notify them that they can come to the council meeting at which, but it's a side distance issue.
Deliveries in the center median aren't as problematic as some of the other issues we're having, where other folks physically with folks that aren't certified as flaggers acting as flaggers as they load vehicles out in the middle of the street and stop traffic on Bay Street, and there's a couple of offenders that, and we're dealing with those.
Letter went out Friday, I think. So.
Okay.
The second parking issue is at Etta Turner, and I was kind of confused by the POBSA letter. It confused me. But
Can we step back? I didn't really understand all that I
Is there a
heard
map too?
at public comment. So I'd like to take it from the beginning so that I have a complete
So
understanding.
there's been an ongoing problem down that the police have been dealing with down
This
there.
year.
This year.
people
This year, and I don't know whether this is going to be ongoing. Normally, when you have repeated problems, it's because of the same people. Same thing with like graffiti's the classic example. You can have 3 people that can totally decimate your whole city, and you think there's thousands of people out there doing it. Same kind of a theory for Etta Turner Park. You have a homeless woman that has a vehicle with a trailer behind it, and she attracts a lot of younger people. And what they do is they park along the curb in front of where the tables are for Etta Turner Park. Etta Turner Park's kind of an unusual park. It's really a transitory park. It's not a destination park.
Right.
Most parks have a parking lot. You go there, you go out into the park. This is more of a walk-by type thing.
And when you say trailer, do you mean
It's like a camper trailer,
Okay.
smaller.
okay?
And what really causes the major problem is that whole curb line from the bank all the way to the bridge is parking, pretty much, all the way along that.
It's not like designated parking.
Yeah, but it's legal to park there. There's no
There's
no
lines on the
restrictions.
street.
No.
I mean, essentially from here to here, you can park along the curb line. And where you get the tables and like the little gazebo thing, if you pull a car and a trailer in front of there, then what you get is the trailer door facing the grassy area or the sidewalk. You have 3 or 4 people inside the vehicles with the doors open looking out over the sidewalk, and then you have the congregation of the people that are between either the picnic tables or the gazebo standing there. It's a public safety issue is what it is. There's drug activity, other types of activity that I'm not quite sure of. It's just really hard to see what's going on. And the other thing it does, it creates a safety perception for most people. I know those tables have taken serious abuse from being carved up. and there's trash. People are, the transient population is using that as their dinner table and
That's one of the
dinner area, and if they're sleeping there, they're using the facilities there, which there are none.
They've been stealing power. This is one of the areas that
Power, that was an
Our
issue.
landscape architect has said this is one of our
It's
hot
just
spots for
become,
years.
and one of the reasons I think, you have to look at the whole picture. You got the area down by the new playground, which has all been opened up. I mean, this has been an effort. Janet Deck, who worked for me, worked with Public Works to get, and with Port Bremerton, have the bushes cleared down there. You've got more activity down there on the waterfront, real families going down there. I mean, if you've ever driven by, it's amazing, the transformation down there, because it was opened up. There's a nice playground, there's the Veterans Wall. If I drive by on Bay Street, I can see who's sitting there underneath the roof, which used to be a real congregation area for some nefarious activity. You can't do that anymore. Plus, you have all these families down there that are looking right at you, and if they see something, they're going to call. And you had the Port of Bremerton that was putting up no smoking signs for us, so we could go down there and push people out. So it worked really well. Well, that probably resorted in having this area where the bushes were high. You can park along the walk there. You create this 10 by 20 foot zone that nobody can see what's going on. And to tell you the truth, if I was down there walking, I wouldn't want to walk through there. I really wouldn't. And I know one of the big pushbacks was from the owner of the actual lot, who rents the various businesses, and said, well, these people are just going to park in our lot. Well, we can deal with that, and they can deal with that. They can, say, hey, these people are parked here. They're not patrons of our businesses, and we tell them they can't park there. I mean, it's a shorter term resolution. I don't like to come up with resolutions just to meet one specific problem for certain specific people, and then it goes away, and we're all punished because we can't park there. Well, first of all, I've never really seen too many people park along there except for the problem people, and it's really, I think if you could just limit. You can do there's several ways you could do it. You do it with a time limit. You could, so that they can't be there for a certain period of time. You just don't get that kind of traffic there for the park.
You could do like they did. So when they expanded the Marina Park, the Spinney Park, they had those 11 spaces at the end, which were for designated park only, and they're 2-hour stalls, and that would be appropriate for this. And not go all the way down, but you would only do the upper 5 or 6 parallel parking stalls, and it'd be for designated park parking, 2 hours. That would give the police the ability to. So you'd have, if somebody did want to drive down there, which I don't think would ever happen. I mean, I was down there just the other day walking on the pathway doing an inspection, and there were 4 guys sitting in the gazebo, and part of this, the homeless, the balloon of closing down the jungle in Seattle we're seeing a lot more homelessness over here. And there were some people there that were, I don't want to profile, but they were definitely there doing things they shouldn't be. And so we're going to see an increase until this redevelops and things are much more active. We're going to be in this zone where things are going to get worse before they get better, in my opinion, of people using it.
That parcel search was actually relevant.
The chief mentioned the one lady with the trailer. There was the other guy that had the RV that we were chasing around town that kept tying into electricity. There's the guy that has the truck with the homemade camper that parks out at Ross Point a lot, or he parks here. There are people that are just living in their car. And so they become an issue when they start, we have the needle problem, we have the use of power that we've had to try to lock off.
Public Works in the Springs we limbed up the vegetation, so that's part of the solution, is we're trying to create visibility.
Please. So I want to go back to you mentioned that these are not designated parking. Since this started, I found out that there is actually, when Bob Hampton, the owner of the property, deeded it to the city, there's a reciprocal agreement in there that is designated overflow parking for the businesses.
That's
This is a right of way.
That's Maple
That's a
Street
right of way.
away.
That's not true.
See where the catch basin, that line goes right through the catch basin? That's just in the Maple Street right away. There is no reciprocal agreement. There's a reciprocal
I was
agreement.
told,
back here.
this was in writing, and that was part of that deal.
Yeah,
I'm just
we would-
bringing that up.
You would need to show that to me because I've not seen any such document.
But you know as well as I do, Scott, that there's plenty of parking for the businesses there right now.
No, it's
Isn't there?
not. No, we use that a lot. Like you said that you've never seen that used.
You mean at night?
Yeah, like in the evening time, early evening. You know, we don't stay open late, so. But I can, 3 days a week. That side's full, and it's people using our business.
Okay, well, that's what I was confused though by that port or the POBSA letter that was saying it was affecting. That's not commercial parking.
No, when people do park there and they walk downtown from there, I mean, I'm front row. We see that every day. So I'm Scott. I own the brewery, so it does impact us very negatively if that goes all no parking. Limbing the trees up in the spring, that didn't happen. If it did happen, it wasn't done properly. Some of those trees are still too low. It wasn't until midsummer that the north end of the park got trimmed down effectively, and it made an immediate and massive difference in the problems we were having on the north end of the park. The problem with Thea, she's moved down to the south end of the park. She's not there as often anymore.
I noticed that.
And I think they just started trimming or just trimmed parts of the south end in the last week. I'm not sure about that. But that south end was neglected, and it was full cover from the west, which is Bay Street. And when we moved into that property, the bushes and everything were smaller. You had good visibility from Bay Street all the way towards the brewery, and you could when you're headed like eastbound, right? And since then, that stuff's just really overgrown. And there's the trees even now on the south end. They're limbed up on the parking lot side, but as you go down and you look over there, there's a tree that's down that hangs down really low over there. That hangs down lower than the bushes come up, right? And that's where she parks.
Yeah.
And that provides her full cover on both sides.
Yeah, but it's not just one individual.
No, it
It's
isn't.
primarily one individual.
But
The guy with the homemade trailer was there he's been there for a year. The other
He's
guy
not
with
been in our parking lot for a year. He's been there, I would guess, less than 14 days, and all the days that he was all summer.
I'm surprised that there is parking allowed there, mainly because it's really fairly close to your business and the way people are parking in there.
That's a really wide area.
It's kind of wide.
You could actually paint that.
But the main problem that I see is like from this point back, any kind of parking along there restricts the view and creates an area of concern for me.
Nick, can you go back into the plan view and do a measurement? How much space is there between into the parking stall, right where that blue cars park, go up a little bit?
This one?
Yeah, from there over to the curb.
To the curb,
Yeah,
40 feet.
40 feet. So
Yeah.
you've got 8. So you got 20. You'd have to have 10 feet. So that's 40. So that's 30. Then you have to have 24 for a 2-lane.
What if, there's enough room there potentially for angled-in parking rather than parallel parking? Would changing the orientation of parking on that curb or putting time limits, like a 2-hour parking limit there because it's right-of-way, would that...
Well, doing it parallel versus you'd have to angle all those and make that loop around the building.
Can I ask a question? So between the bank and the center itself, you see those vehicles that are parked there, and that seems somewhat characteristic of how many vehicles I see parked there when I go by. Is that not adequate parking?
Our location, it puts us. That would mean that our customers and staff would have to park right in that front parking lot.
Right. Well,
Right. There's no street lights along that west side of the building. The park lighting is more ornamental than functional. It doesn't really light the park up. So that doesn't help. And it just sort of gets a little bit sketchy when you're walking that distance to your car when you could park right in
But
front
that
of
would
the-
be Bob Hampton would be responsible.
I mean, in terms of adequacy of parking, you're walking less than a minute perhaps. It doesn't seem like it's unreasonable to expect that your clients would or could be able to park in the main parking lot, because I think that's what that parking lot was designed for, was to take care of the entire center.
No, it's back to the days of the Beachcomber. They parked just like they do today, where they park in front of the building and they park along the side. It's been that way since that building was put in.
Okay.
Well, again, I got to go back to there is no designated parking along Etta Turner. It's parking in the Maple Street right of way, waterway. So it's not been designated one way or the other. We would, through municipal code, would establish official parking in there, and we'd stripe it
If we think that's a good idea.
if we think
Yeah.
that's a good idea.
I just, where the people are using the tables and using the gazebo, walking that sidewalk, mainly transitory people, when you have a group of people that are protected by a vehicle along that curbway, it causes me great public safety concern, and that outweighs everything else.
It adds to
Can
the
we take this
sketchiness
that I've
we're
heard?
talking about.
Can we take the tables out? That's been proposed, but I never heard any follow-up on that.
I don't think the city wants to take
Why
the
would you
tables
take
out.
out
I
the
think they
tables?
want to provide
We're not gonna-
tables for the people that are walking their dogs or.
Well, especially
You know-
when they open up the segment of the pathway.
I mean, that's what it's mainly for. It's not the lunchroom for the transient population behind the Kentucky Fried Chicken, which
Yeah.
Eventually that's what it ends up being.
But current use, that's not how it's used. Public doesn't use those tables. Public uses a gazebo. Public uses the table out on the point, on the other side of the bridge. But it's the amount of shade and stuff those trees provide in the cover. It's not even a comfortable or really, it's always kind of moist over there. So yeah, it's been brought up. And
So Mark, I'm looking at this and I just measured from the curb to the right-of-way line. It's only 19 feet, and we don't have any easements to be able to turn around out here for people to actually be able to orient themselves to park. So it seems to me that this needs to remain a dead-end two-way road
Right.
rather than a.
To make it one way, I know Bob Hampton would have an issue with that because that's his loading
Yeah.
dock area. So that's where he brings his delivery trucks, and they park. So we
Yeah, I don't think we actually have the right to create
We
the
don't have
turnaround
the
that would facilitate
we
parking.
don't. That's private property. We can't. Yeah.
But
How many spots are there on the west? Currently, like maybe 5 spots. Do you think?
You could
Parallel
probably get
parking?
For
Yeah,
parallel?
Depends what's parking there.
That's what got Scott's.
Like how many spots?
how many
Right.
cars can actually park there?
Mark Fournier found that we could parallel park
About
legally two cars, and you could make a left turn or right turn out of it through the parking lot from a traffic control standpoint.
right. The issue is if we park, that should be no parking all up there because again, as was mentioned by Nick, there's no official. You're having to go onto private property to turn around there. So we really should limit our parking stalls where they could use that drive aisle.
If there should be any parking there at all.
If
Yeah.
any at all. So you put 2 stalls right at the east-west drive aisle there, and then the rest would be, and that would be parking.
I mean, there's no at all width from here down. I mean, it's too narrow.
It's too narrow
Too
there.
narrow because
Sure
of
it
these
is.
parking. The chief's visibility problems are here, and Nick brings up a valid point. We can't legally park too far down here because we can't create a turnaround point, but there is a driveway here that somebody could exit through. So we could create some parking.
I think
And this-
there were 2 stalls right there.
If we weren't concerned about some of the issues that the chief has talked about.
I'm just trying to find a compromise.
I think the best option is not to have parking along that curb because technically it's not illegal now, but there's no indicators that there's spots there.
It was not designed to
not-
have.
yeah,
park.
exactly.
It was a park that was dedicated because of Etta. It's like an urban park that's mainly foot traffic, and it's just unfortunate that it's been misused.
So one of your concerns was lighting in the main parking lot?
Well, it's just if we end up, there is a lot of cover and there's a big trash receptacle that's where Thea and her flunkies hide now when they aren't parked on the park. It's right in the middle of the parking lot, so it's something that our customers and staff would have to walk right past. It's sketchier and more dangerous to walk through the front parking lot at night than it is to walk along the park, in our experience. I mean,
That's the illumination in the park.
But I think that's what we're doing, is we're eliminating the sketchiness by not allowing this to perpetuate.
It's happening in the main parking lot. It's this is historically, so that location.
If there are people hanging out in Bob Hampton's parking lot,
but
the businesses can call and say, there are people out in that lot,
Yeah.
they're not patrons of this business, we want them out of here.
None of the businesses on that side of the building are open.
Whereas if people are parked along that road or along the edge of the curb there, right now, the only thing that we have to have them move on is the park closes at dusk. And we can go over there and say, hey, the park's closed at dusk, but then they can all scurry into their cars right next to that where there's public sidewalk, and I'm not sure the public sidewalk is part of the park. So there's really not a lot of enforcement there. But if Bob Hampton has a problem with people loitering on his lot, he's just like every other business here in town that we respond to, and we take enforcement action.
But it's not. This isn't even loitering. This is, and we watch this happen, and we've pushed it out of that west end where we're at. That's really, and the north end of the park now is not a problem. It's the south end where it's still overgrown. But what we see happening, and it's been happening here for decades now, is people drive in, they do a drug deal, and they're gone. They meet up here, right? They're doing it on the bridge now, right? And so
That happens a lot of places.
yeah. Well,
But that's not what I'm concerned about right
Yeah.
now. What I'm concerned about is an area of this city where we legitimately are going to have people walking on a walkway that we're trying to improve, and we have this little zone that is so hidden from the curb side that you could have everything from a serious assault to a rape or something happen right there and nobody's going to know about it. Not until it's over. And that's what concerns me.
Yeah, I think you can park cars in lots of areas where you can do that behind a car. I think opening up the bushes, the recommendation we got from, the community officer was bushes should be 2.5 foot tall, not 4 foot tall, which is what they are in there now. Having the visibility from Bay Street is what has kept that clean before.
Yeah, well, we can get in and do that, but I think the chief's point is the cars.
I have police go into that parking lot because we've been really concentrating, and you should know that.
Oh, yeah.
And we're contacting those people, but by the time we get over there and get on the other side of the cars, who knows what was happening?
That's, I think,
And that's just
illumination
a,
takes care
that's
of a lot
just
of
a
issues.
poor,
We have illumination on our.
that's just a poor situation.
Parking lot.
Yeah, we can open up
That's
the
not our-
vegetation, but
I
having
know.
the cars parking there just creates more problem.
I say we start there. Let's get things opened up. Let's disallow parking and
But-
let's monitor it.
And I think maybe a conversation with Bob about better illumination of his parking lot might help as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are currently like maybe 5 spots there that we would just not allow parking on.
Well, there's
The parallel.
there's no spots. There's
Okay,
zero spots.
I mean, how many cars would
Probably
you just
5 or
look at
6.
it? Okay, so those cars would no longer be able to park there on the west side.
Right. It'd just be a red zone, and the park would be like it's supposed to be, where you can
Pedestrian.
drive up and look in there and see what's going on, and people feel safer.
Yeah, it's not a destination park. It's
So
a walking.
if that's the recommendation of this committee, it still needs all of these parking changes. Still needs to go back to the full council.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the last third one was Fred Olin came in with kind of a request, but it's like just specific to like one house. So it's up on Tracy, and he's asking for it to just be no parking in front of this one house.
Is there a safety?
So
net?
Fred built the condos that he has. I think it's a 3-story building, and he improved the right of way in front of his house and created parking.
We want to pull that up because I'm having.
Maybe Nick can.
What's the address?
Tracy, like
Tracy,
200 block or something.
And it is the right of way, and so you can't. I don't believe you can
Where's the
create
Farragut?
private parking. There you go. It's the
Big thing?
No, right.
No.
001. Go up.
right there. You're up,
No, up.
up to the right. Right.
Keep going, keep going.
Right there.
All right.
Yeah, go to Street View. That's it, that big condo.
Yeah.
Okay.
there on the
So
right.
those parking stalls out on the street, that he did improve them.
Where that truck and trailer is?
Yep.
But he's talking about not those, he's talking about
Those
the
ones
house
up-
next door. Isn't he?
I don't know. I thought he was referring to those parking stalls in front of his place.
No, he's
Making them a no parking?
No, he was
I don't
talking about a house next door that recently sold.
Okay, I can't speak to it then.
But then, I mean,
To replace the current 2-hour parking sign with a no parking sign. So where's the 2-hour parking sign at? I'm looking at his letter.
there it is.
There it
There's
is. So would it be beyond that, or would it be?
4 hours.
That's 4 hour.
The
I don't
two.
think-
Where's the 2-hour?
Where's the 2-hour?
Is
Is it
that
the grassy area behind him, or
The street.
go up? Is it? It might be across the street.
that can't be?
There's no parking across the street. That's what that one says.
Pavement is narrow. Not pedestrian residence.
That was
Maybe
a
it's
tricky
there.
place to
I'm
park.
guessing he was mistaken when we said 2-hour and he meant 4-hour.
Well, he's got.
That's his. No, that's not his truck. That's
Look at. I think this might be the sign he's talking about.
Oh, okay.
Can you find this? Here's the photo. But is it that sign he's talking about? Where is that?
That's probably down.
I thought it
probably
was-
down there by the curb.
That
Oh,
one.
right
Is
there.
that a
That's
2-hour
right
parking
there.
sign?
No parking.
There's
No,
no
that's just that's
during
our snow.
All right.
Is that
What picture
113
did he
Tracy?
provide?
I think he was complaining about the turn sight
That's the
distance
thing.
or something.
It's got to be back farther. Is there?
Which way? The other way?
Yeah, maybe that.
Yeah,
I haven't seen the
okay.
2-hour parking sign yet.
I didn't think there was
Someone
any-
has to call
Maybe,
Fred to get more
maybe Fred
information.
can get us a better description of the issue.
Well,
Needle
there's
in a
for sale
haystack.
sign.
There's a
Oh,
2-hour
there,
parking.
there it is.
There's a 2-hour parking sign.
Oh, that household. Yeah, that was a while ago though.
Oh, it is that house because it just sold.
And he wants, okay, so he wants to go from 2-hour to,
No
So
parking.
he's concerned about parking there on the shoulder, I guess, because the road width is narrow. Is his complaint?
Well, if they're off the road.
He says that when he came and talked to me about it, I wasn't really sure where he was talking. He said that it wasn't an issue before, but now that the people are remodeling the house, there's contractors parking out there.
Blocking the road.
well, that's, okay. Not a big
It's
issue.
temporary.
Yeah.
But you can see where the water meter is. You can see how far back the right of way is.
They could park on the lawn.
Well,
Yeah, this grass strip is in the right of way.
there's a whole lot of.
It's actually 2 houses, I think. Her mother-in-law.
It's strange that we have a 2-hour parking a sign up there at all.
Well, it's commuters and
School.
the school.
Oh, that's why it happened.
supposed to be
Yeah. So otherwise, it was just getting, people go parking in the high school.
How
Oh
far
yeah,
back?
there's a high school.
It's close to the school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what it was established
Yeah.
for, was to keep high
Yeah.
school students from parking.
Filling up the street.
Because there's not enough parking on site for the students?
High school, yeah.
Yeah, there's
Oh,
not.
That's your subject. Vehicle search on school grounds.
Well, especially during football games and stuff. It's
Okay.
Football games is the
Well,
big one.
kids don't want to pay the parking pass fee, so they could find somewhere else to park.
Oh, right, okay.
And
You
that-
have to
that's
pay for,
only a block away.
I'll learn all these things soon.
Yeah, you will.
You will.
so the bigger question is you're not going to change it just in front of that house. You're going to have to look at the municipal
street.
block.
Right.
It's going to be Tracy Avenue from Kendall or whatever that street is, or DeKalb, that might be.
Is there enough off-street
Counselor.
parking? I just,
There's no off street. Well,
I mean, no, no,
it's a hard place to park.
Yeah, for the residents, do they have enough off-street parking to accommodate their needs? And I don't. This is a tough one. Good luck.
Yeah, you're really talking about eliminating parking on Tracy.
It's hard to
If you're gonna
when you're
change
doorbelling.
I guess that would have been good when they have Brandy here to see how many. So residential parking passes, do those exempt you from the time limitations?
Yes.
Okay, so that's where people are parking on the streets. They're getting a residential parking permit.
So he wants no parking just in this area,
In
right?
front of that one house.
He could put in a curb and, I mean, he could improve the right of way to prevent the people from parking there, right? And then we would sign it.
Well, he can't. We wouldn't want to just put an arbitrary curve in.
Well, I don't think the homeowner's complaining. Fred's complaining.
Fred's complaining. And this isn't an arterial street here.
Yeah. But I mean, right now, you can drive off of the road onto the shoulder there.
Again, see where the meter is?
I think I would have
Yeah.
So that's where the property line is.
I would have a tendency to listen to the owner of that property first.
Right.
Well, and maybe it's a discussion with that owner to make sure that his contractors aren't blocking the street. We've received a complaint
That's what it
about
sounds like.
the ability for residents in the neighborhood to drive the street, and
You're not allowed.
it's been observed that
Not allowed to obstruct the street right away, and
Make
if
sure-
that's happening, you call the police and we send somebody out.
Nice long driveway they could park in there.
Including, it looks like off the shoulder.
they got plenty of room off the shoulder too. You can get off the shoulder.
All right.
Up and out of the street. So I think it's a letter probably to the resident.
I think I talked to those people. It's a younger couple.
Do we have an address for that?
Send Fred.
231. They're nice people.
Is
if
that-
they're the ones
It's right
that
up on there in the corner of the house if you can get in without
Is that
getting
a little ADU there?
Louis.
I think it's an ADU.
Nice.
It's a neat little.
231, 235.
Is that right? Because the address he's complaining about is 113.
That's his address.
No, that's his address.
This is 220.
213.
Yeah, those addresses are weird too because they have Tracy North and Tracy.
Which would be right next door to him.
That was exactly the
And then one
photo.
parcel back.
The picture.
205.
223,
Oh, wrong direction. Give this back.
219.
What are we looking for?
213.
Or
113.
113, sorry.
That'd
17.
be right there.
Right there.
this one on the corner.
113 right there.
There in the corner.
All right. So forget everything we just said.
It's the same
Same principle.
It's the same global principle. We're just for making sure the letter goes to the right address.
And where that red car is?
I think it's.
Ooh, who'd want to park right there?
There's a sign right there.
You'd fall on
Yeah,
the
it's
bushes.
the snow one.
That
though.
one said snow, yeah.
But it's 2 hour,
Yeah,
but
the 2
based
hour
on
continues.
continues, yeah.
It's just 2 hour on that. The code probably says Tracy from.
And there isn't room. He's right. There isn't room to park there.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, because you look where that white van is right now. If you got a car parking on the other side, you can't get through the road.
That
It seems like it needs a no parking zone needs to start just past
Well,
these
the
driveways.
easier solution is
From here.
you just have a fog line because you don't
Or
have.
yeah.
But we don't want to have to stripe all of our residential streets. Yeah, there is no room to park. Where
Yeah.
that one
Yeah, I
house we were looking at actually had
Yeah.
Yeah.
some.
Yep.
So maybe
no
we need
parking east
maybe
of
we,
here.
from that mailbox
All the way down.
to where,
All the way.
where it opens back up.
Yeah, all the way in here.
Yeah, but I got to look at Tracy. I got to look at the entire Tracy.
Okay. So there could be some validity
If
to
there's
this.
other areas where you.
How about we bring this one back after Mark?
Yeah,
I
bring
think
back
we
his
just-
recommendation.
I think we just need to look at Tracy in general.
Yeah. So Mark needs to holistically look at Tracy. You got one last issue, your land disturbing permit process out. Anybody?
So just real high level, obviously it's after mid-October, which means it's raining, and we got a request just to discuss kind of our land disturbing activity permit process. And so the way that these permits work is that we issue land disturbing activity permits, and we put conditions on the permits that say that you have to, your erosion control needs to be in accordance with best management practices. It references our stormwater manual, but ultimately every site is required to designate an erosion control lead. It's called a CECL, and that CECL has discretion to determine what best management practices to deploy where. And the city really can't give any guidance to that person until there's a failure, or I suppose we could say that what you're doing is deficient. We can't say that you need to deploy, a specific methodology on the site.
Right. The MPDS permit, so I'll rehash a little bit. So you go through your entitlement process, you have CPIS, secret-based conditions. If you disturb more than an acre, you have to do an MPDS permit, notice of intent. At that time, you identify the permittee, you identify who your CECL is, and so for these construction MPDS permits, it's specific that they have to have the SWIP, Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. They have to have that prepared. In there, they have BMPs and ACARTs that they can employ. The city can't go out and say, you need to do silt fence, you need to do that, because the responsibility for the property owner is to comply with the standard. On that particular site that we were talking about, 25 NTUs is what you can discharge. They were discharging 625 because they had no source control in place. But again, this is the guy that's doing 100 miles an hour down I-5 weaving between traffic. It's like, you're responsible. All we can do is come out and say, do you have your SWIP? Yes, it's right here. Are you doing your daily reports? Yes. Are you taking turbidity samples? Yes. Or in this particular case, no. And in those cases, just like Horseman, that's where ecology comes out and they get fined. Or like in the case of that developer from the east side that actually went to jail, if ecology comes out and says, hey, you need to do something, and they work with the person, but if the person continues to ignore them or tell them to get off this property, that's when this particular individual actually went to jail, because he just gave ecology the middle finger when they were trying to work with them. So there's really, this is kind of that property ownership, property responsibility thing.
And can they kind of work year round? Is there any part of that process?
It's in the SWIP. So in the SWIP it says, prior to October 15th, you can, all year round, you can only work a certain amount of the property, and then once you leave, like piles of dirt uncovered. And so this particular site, because it's a mass cut fill site, they had to open the entire property. We get that. That's why we approved their grading plan back in March. So you got plenty of time, because you got to cut all this material. And as long as you're working it, I think in the summer you have, 7 days for an area where you're not working it. As soon as you hit October 15th, you only got 2 days. So there's a level 2 erosion standard of now you're into the winter. If you're not working an area within 2 days, you have to completely source control. And so that's really the issue that happened on this site, was they had that entire site open. Their hog fuel burned over the summer. And so all that material that they had planned to put on the site, it just burned up in about 4 days. And they never ever made that a focus to source control, even though they had areas that they had tracked and they were done. They should have hydroseeded it. And on the areas that were, they didn't even put straw down. And then you have areas that are 2-to-1 cuts. Well, straw doesn't work on those. You need to visqueen those and sandbag them. And at the end of the day, if they had worked an area when it was done, had gone in and hydroseeded it and then put visqueen over it and sandbagged it, we wouldn't have had the problems we're having today. But they ignored the site until, in every meeting that Nick and I had with them, we had one back in March, we had one in June, we had another one here in July. We had one in September. And every single meeting, I made a point to say, what are you doing? You didn't manage the dust very well. So dust also is a offsite erosion, because you're still transporting sediment offsite. Yeah. We were having dust issues all summer, and the last time we met, I looked at the owner and I said, I'm really nervous. It was actually the week before it started to rain. I said, it's going to start raining and you've got none of that site covered. We got it handled, was what I heard. We got it handled. I'm like, okay. And then Saturday I was out working outside and it started to sprinkle, and all of a sudden the sky opened up and it forced me into the house, and I went, my wife looked at me. She said, why do you have that look on your face? I said, because I'm hoping Tremont's going to hold up, and I know there's a major residential site that's not ready for this. And I came into work Monday, and
You've been busy ever since.
Thank God we haven't had heavy rains.
Yeah. And
I know a lot of times
It's been crazy dry.
So Ecology, it's a up to $10,000 per day per offense fine, and I think there were like 17 violations reported when Ecology came out on Monday. So they should have all the motivation in the world to get this thing under control.
Right, and they're working with them, but we issued a right-of-way permit, so we stopped working them and said you can only do erosion control. So that gets into what we're allowed to do.
Right. And I think that was the point of conversation, is when these things occur, not site specific, but what's the city's role? As we get questions saying, what's going on and what are you guys doing about it? It's just nice to know where the different levels of enforcement are, and it's been a great explanation.
The unfortunate thing is it's taken almost all of last week for a handful of staff people to deal with this, and this isn't something that we're getting compensated for as part of a permit application. It's just code enforcement. So
Well, Ecology can put out a press release.
We don't have a fine mechanism.
Yeah.
we do, and
We
we're
do.
if they violate the stop work order, we have a mechanism in place, but we can also potentially pursue under our critical areas code for damaging wetlands and streams.
We did on Horseman. We added Ecology fined Horseman, and then the city actually had fines as well. So we have that ability that, usually in these cases, again, we're trying to be proactive on, hey, make sure your Cecil knows what they're doing. And our guys are out all the time asking the Cecils, let me see your SWIP, let me see your report. You really need to start looking at the weather change and complying. What we can't do is go out and say you need to cover that, you need to cover that, because if we do and it fails, then they'll just say, well, the city told us.
Yep.
So it's a fine line.
It's been good explanations. Thank you.
All right, I think that's it then, huh?